I lived nearly 44 years believing a lie about what it means to be protected. I thought covering had to be earned, managed, braced for the day it disappeared, because every version of it I'd ever had eventually did. If you're the woman who married for protection and found out she was carrying him instead, if you're the woman who never had a safe parent to run to, so you built your own shelter before you were old enough to know that's what you were doing, if you're the woman who prayed for God to protect her through a marriage that was already quietly ending and wondered where God was while it happened, underneath every one of those, there's one wound bigger than all of them. You have never once, for a single season of your life, known what it feels like to be fully covered without earning it, managing it, or being let down by it. That is not a hard heart. That is simply a wound. And today I'm going to show you the difference about what God taught me about receiving His covering anyway, even though it went against every experience I'd ever had. This is for you. I am Katie Ann, and this is Beyond Believing, episode 102. I built my life on borrowed ground. I married at 23, 6 weeks after I met him, inside a culture where waiting any longer felt like being left behind. I called that ground covering because I didn't know yet that borrowed ground was never built to hold anyone. I didn't fully understand what was actually happening during those years. It's only now, only since God started teaching me what covering really means, that I have language for the misalignment I felt, but could never name. After my divorce, I kept reaching for the same thing in different places. I trusted carefully, I sought out counsel, and I still ended up in something that looked like covering and wasn't. That was a real lesson, and it cost me something real, but it's not the center of this story. The center of this story is a woman named Jolene. God brought her into my life as a true blessing, a godly woman who took me under her wing in the first raw season of knowing God and the Bible outside the only lens I'd ever had. She had walked her own version of this same road, and at our very first meeting over coffee, before we parted, she asked if she could pray over me. This was completely foreign to me, but I said yes anyways. And of everything she prayed over me that day, one thing has remained above all else: that I would understand what it means for God to be my husband. I had never been prayed for the way that she prayed over me that day. I had no context for the prayer about God being my husband, but it planted a question at the back of my mind that quietly replaced every other desire I had. What does it actually mean for God to be my husband? And here's what I know now, and didn't before I started learning this. I had never actually received true, godly covering and protection. And God has been teaching me slowly, patiently, what that covering looks like and how to receive it. Here's what I have also learned. Receiving isn't passive. It's not something that just happens to you one day. It requires something from you. And what that actually looks like, that's what I want to show you today. There's a verse that sometimes gets taken out of context instead of taught the way Jesus meant it. Matthew 23:37. Jesus says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones those sent to it. How often I have longed to gather your children together, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing." Jesus is speaking to Jerusalem's religious leaders, the heirs. The verse before this one says, of the very people who killed the prophets God sent them. This is willful, chosen, and repeated across generations. That is hardness. That is not the same thing as a woman who's guarded because she's never been shown covering. But I want to show you something about the word wings because it's not decoration. It is the whole point. In Hebrew, the word for a bird's wing, kanaf, is the exact same word used for the corner of a garment. One word, two pictures. When Ruth goes to the threshing floor and asks Boaz in Ruth 3:9 to spread the corner of your garment over me, that's kanaf. The same word Boaz used earlier when he blessed her for taking refuge under the kanaf, the wings of the God of Israel in Ruth 2:12. Malachi promises healing in God's kanaf. Deuteronomy pictures God as an eagle spreading his kanaf over his people. It's everywhere in the Old Testament, one image doing double duty as both flight and clothing, both power and nearness. Matthew wrote his gospel in Greek, and the word he uses for wings in this verse, terugos, isn't the same word as the Hebrew, but Jesus, a Jewish rabbi speaking to a Jewish city, is reaching straight into that entire tradition anyway. He's not offering a random metaphor. He is telling Jerusalem plainly, I am that covering. I am what your own scriptures have been describing all along. Now here's what floors me every time I sit with this. Because God commanded Israel to sew tassels into the kanaf, the corners of their garments, so they'd remember who they belonged to in Numbers 15:38. That means Jesus, as an observant Jewish man, had tassels on the corner of his own robe, a literal, physical kanaf. And 6 chapters before Matthew ever recorded Jesus grieving over Jerusalem's refusal, 6 chapters earlier, same gospel, same author, a woman who'd bled for 12 years reaches into a crowd and touches exactly that. The Greek word there is kraspidon, the tassel or corner, the kanaf. She wasn't reaching for fabric. She was reaching for the very thing Jesus would later weep over Jerusalem for refusing. Now I need you to sit with what reaching cost her. Because under the law, her condition made her ceremonially unclean. And not just her. Anyone who touched her became unclean also. And for 12 years, that wasn't a private medical struggle she carried alone. It was a public identity. She could not be embraced. She could not sit in worship the way others did. As a Christian woman who's walked through the divorce, I don't think I need to explain to you what it feels like to carry an identity you did not choose in a community you quietly feel untouchable in. But this woman goes anyway, into the crowd, knowing full well what her touch would technically do to anyone she brushed against. She ignores every cultural rule built to keep her separate and reaches for the one corner of fabric that meant covenant and belonging and the God who carries, regardless what it cost her to do so. She wasn't seeking public acceptance. She'd given up on that years ago. She was seeking covenantal identity restoration, the one thing 12 years of exclusion had never been able to touch. And Jesus doesn't say her boldness earned something. He says in Matthew 9:22, "Take heart, daughter. Your faith has made you well." Here's what these two moments in the very same book are actually showing us side by side. A woman reaches for the kanaf and receives everything it promised. A city refuses the kanaf, standing in front of it, and grieves the God who offered it. Same covering, same imagery running underneath both stories, but two completely different responses. That's the piece Jerusalem's leaders never did. The covering stood in front of them and they did not reach. But you are not them. You have not rejected what's plainly in front of you and refused it. You have just never been shown there was anything to reach for at all. But now you have. And here's the part that is so good. It has completely transformed everything I understand about God's protection and covering, not because I was ready, but because I was finally willing to find out. So what does it actually look like to reach? I didn't figure that out sitting alone with a theory. Jolene wasn't the only one who covered me. Her husband James did as well, and together they took me under their wing, not as a metaphor, an actual, ongoing, ordinary kind of covering. Through phone calls, shepherding, being told the truth when I needed it, and being held when I needed that instead. Here's what I have to be honest about. That prayer over coffee planted a seed, but it didn't instantly change me. I still resisted receiving covering for years, even while James and Jolene were actively offering it. And then, much to my dismay, they moved 4 hours away to plant a church. I lost the very people God had used to start teaching me this. But their shepherding never actually stopped. It just continued from a distance. I didn't fully embrace what they'd been trying to show me until recently, when it's like a veil was removed from my eyes and I was like, now I understand. I am an incredibly stubborn Italian in every sense of the word, and definitely merely human, the way Paul describes it. Receiving never came naturally to me. I had to learn slowly to change my heart posture. I used to see receiving as weakness, as something you avoided if you were strong enough, capable enough, together enough. Now I understand it completely differently. Receiving isn't a sign that something's wrong with you. It's an opportunity, the actual doorway into deeper relationship and connection with the people God puts in your life and with Him Himself. That's when Jolene's prayer stopped being a foreign phrase and started becoming something I understood in my body, in my heart, not just my head. God is my husband wasn't a nice theological idea. It was what I was finally watching Him do, covering me through people He'd placed in my path years before I was ready to receive it or fully understand it. The same way He covered Ruth through Boaz, the same way He healed a woman for simply reaching toward a hem. I did not manufacture that covering. I couldn't have. I just finally stopped refusing it. If it took me that long to reach and He still met me there, I need you to hear what this means for you, because here's who you become the moment you stop refusing it too. You are not hard-hearted. You were never rejected. You were simply never shown. Now you have been shown, and God has always longed to cover you. That was never something you had to earn, because you are the woman who reaches now. Not because you have to prove anything, but because you finally know there's someone safe to reach out to. This is the work that I do in my coaching, not to be the answer, but to point you to the one who is, to remind you that you have access to everything you truly desire, and to help you begin living like it today. If this episode put language to where you are right now, I want to invite you to book a Rooted Clarity call with me. This is a private 45-minute conversation where we'll look at what's keeping you stuck in fear, stress, overwhelm, or survival mode, and what it could look like to become firmly rooted in the identity God has spoken over you. If Selah Healing is the right fit, I'll share what working together could look like. The link is in the show notes. There's more to this story, and I can't wait to show you next time. Subscribe so you don't miss it. I'll see you then.